Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Buying a Home in Rotterdam. My name is Rick. I am a buying manager at Expat Housing Network. I'm Dutch and I currently live in the city center of Rotterdam. But for my studies, I've spent some time in South Africa and Colombia. So just like you guys, some experiences abroad. At EHN, we believe that greatness is achieved in the agency of others. So I have an amazing team. First, we have our Brazilian superstars, Giovanna and Larissa. They both live in Eindhoven, so they're responsible for the region or the southern region of the Netherlands. And then we also have our Amsterdam team, which consists of Matt, Ludo, and Amy. And Ludo is in this webinar as well. Maybe you can shortly introduce yourself.
Sure thing. My name is Ludo. Nice to meet you guys. I am also a buying agent in the region of Amsterdam. So not in Rotterdam, but in Amsterdam. If you guys are not only looking in Rotterdam, but are looking in the majority of the cities in the Netherlands and potentially Amsterdam, then you'd be in contact with me. I'm not here today just to introduce myself, but I'm also here to manage the Q&A. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to pop them in the Q&A. I think it should be in the bottom of your screen. Either during the webinar or after the webinar, I'll be here to answer those questions and assisting Rick in that matter.
All right. Well, thank you. Let's move on. So a short introduction about EHN. First of all, we're no traditional real estate agents. However, we do support with buying, renting, letting, and also selling. Recently, we set up a selling service. For you guys, that might be a little bit too soon, but just so you know. I mentioned we're no traditional real estate agents. Why? We charge a percentage of the appraisal value as our fee. Whereas a lot of traditional real estate agents, they charge a percentage over the purchase price. We said we do not want to give our clients the feeling that we just want to offer the highest price so we can earn the most. No, we based on the value, so we do not benefit from you paying anything extra. So the goal is really to get the best deal for you. And then, as you could have seen, we're either expats ourselves or we've lived in foreign countries, so we know what it's like to settle in a new country. Then, what is the added value of EHN? First of all, selling agents take offers more seriously from their colleagues. In the cities we work, we have quite an extended network. So probably agents have worked with us before, and they know we did our checks on our clients. And it is the case that selling agents prefer to work with buying agents. And because of our network, we're also able to book viewings when it's for you, sometimes not possible anymore. Selling agents often have like special blogs for their colleagues, or they allow us to go by ourselves when they handle like other people, and we can go with our clients. Very important for those of you who already viewed a property, you might have seen that you receive a list of property documents, and unfortunately, those are in Dutch. Well, we make sure that you understand them and that you know everything what you should know. Then, really, really important is we have to define the market value through market data. We'll talk about this a bit more into detail in a bit. But maybe the most important part in the buying process. Then every property has its own rules, regulations, and restrictions, and we will inform you about those as well. Also, really important to have an understanding about those kind of things before submitting an offer. And then last but not least, we make sure you don't make the same mistakes as we made. With the team, I think we've seen it all. So we make sure that you experience a smooth buying process. What will we discuss today? First, a short introduction. We're going to talk about the market, some market drivers, the topic of savings, also really important to know how much do you actually need in order to be able to buy a property. Renting versus buying, the comparison, 3 tips to win the market, and in the end, I will recap everything by going over the timeline and explain how we potentially can support you. Starting off with the market. So here you see a graph which shows the development of the purchase price or the purchase prices in the Netherlands. In Q3 this year, the average purchase price in the Netherlands was 422,000 euros. And in Q2, this was 410. So you see that prices are increasing again. And that is also what the graph shows, right? As everyone might know, prices went up really fast over the past years, especially 2020, 2021. And then prices dropped a little bit, summer last year. But now you see the trend is going up again. And the new builds are a little bit higher. Of course, this has to do with the quality of the properties that you get. So for Q3, this was 474,000 euros. If we then look at Rotterdam or the Rotterdam region specifically, last quarter, 2,377 houses were sold. Not much of a difference compared to Q2, a little bit more than 2022. There were 2,304 properties for sale. Again, not much of a difference. And also for the average purchase price. The average purchase price in the Rotterdam region is a little bit lower than in the Netherlands in general, so 380,000 euros. Compared to Q3 last year, it's a small decrease of 1%. But again, if you look at it from on a quarter basis, you see that it's a small increase. Similar numbers for the price per square meter. But then interesting, the sales time. So on average, it takes 36 days for a property to be sold. And that is a lot longer than 2022. And I think for you guys as potential buyers, this is definitely a good sign. And we also see that back on a daily basis. So in the past, a lot of properties had a deadline. So that means that, for example, the selling agent scheduled all the viewings for this week, and then you had until Monday, 11 a.m. to submit your final offer. Now it is still happening, but not as much as before. So you also have properties that have been on the market for a bit longer, and then you can really negotiate with the sellers. Like the process is a little bit different. This is already changing, because if you compare it with Q2, you see that the sales time is already shorter. So I'm curious where this will go the coming months, but I think it's more likely that it's going to be shorter than longer. Then the market drivers, maybe good to know what caused the prices to increase. Well, first of all, we have some fiscal benefits in the Netherlands. And the first one is the transfer tax exemption. So normally when you buy a property, transfer tax has to be paid. And if you're going to live in the property yourself, the transfer tax is 2%. If you're buying a property as an investor, the transfer tax is 10.4%. So good to keep that in mind. But we have a rule or regulation that says that if you buy your first property in the Netherlands, you are below the age of 35, so up until 34. And the purchase price of your property is below 440,000 euros, you're exempt from paying the transfer tax. Then the interest rebate. So at the moment, still the interest you pay on your mortgage is tax deductible. So you do get back around 37%. No capital gains. What do we mean by that? Excuse me. Of course, a lot of people made some nice profits on their properties that were sold over the past years, and no taxes have to be paid over the profit that you make. Then we have the tax-free parent donation. Good to know. So we have also a rule that people that pay taxes in the Netherlands, so Dutch people, let's say, can donate money to their children if they're going to buy a property. This used to be around 100,000 euros. Then they lowered it to around 30K, and it says ending because as of next year, this is no longer applicable. Then the high rents for those that are renting, which I assume most of you, you might have experienced that the rents in the Netherlands at the moment are extremely high. Me and Ludo were focused on buying, but the first time my colleagues from rental told me that people overbid on rental prices, I was like, this is insane. But unfortunately, that is the current market. So of course, a lot of people were looking for an alternative. Well, what is the alternative of renting? Of course, buying. Then the lack of supply. So in the Netherlands at the moment, I think we have a housing shortage of around 300,000 houses. And prices, yeah, basic economics are defined by supply and demand. And there's just such a big demand for properties that prices went up really fast. Then if we look at the current market, uh, the interest rates went up, so and quite fast, because I think the beginning of last year rates were around 1%, which of course is yeah, extremely low, right? So it was almost you could almost borrow for free, I always say. But then the interest rates went up. At the moment, I think it's around 4.3%, if I'm not mistaken. And you could also see this in the prices, right? As I just mentioned, the moment the interest rate went up, prices started to decrease because people were like, hey, it can't continue like this. But we already saw that that was only for a short period. Because in general, there's more listings, especially over the past months. At the moment, I have to say it's not that much more, which we could also see in the previous figures, right? But in general, there's less overbidding, which also has to do with the time you have, right? So nowadays, it's most of the times you can go for a second viewing, or not every property has this deadline. So definitely a positive sign on the market. However, we still have a lack of supply. And that is also why you see that prices went up again, even though money is a little bit more expensive than it was. There's still so many people looking for a property. Well, our government, or hopefully our new government, is trying to do their best to build as much as they can. The goal is to build 900,000 houses before 2030. If you ask me, I'm not sure whether that will be possible, because they never built so many properties. And also with everything going on in the world right now, raw materials are expensive. It's hard to find good labor. So I don't think that this problem will be solved anytime soon. And then for you, probably the question is it still a good time to buy? Well, if you are, I don't have a glazing ball. If I had a glazing ball, I think I would have had a different job. But I don't expect prices to decrease, like, or major decrease anytime soon, just because of this huge demand for properties. Then some other interesting topics I would like to share with you. And the first one is about the self-occupancy obligation. So for the people that are looking to buy a property as an investment, please keep in mind that in Rotterdam, we have a self-occupancy obligation in 16 different neighborhoods in the city. What does it mean? Properties with a WZ value up to 405,000 euros, you're not allowed to rent them out. And it's only in 16 different areas. For example, the city center is not included. The north part of Rotterdam is not included. But areas like Kralingen, Krooswijk are. So please have a look at this before starting the process, before submitting any offers. Then the NHG threshold will increase next year. Maybe good to explain what is NHG. NHG is an institute that helps you when you can no longer afford your mortgage. For example, if your partner passes away or if you lose your job, then NHG, together with the bank, will look into your mortgage to see if they can make it affordable. If not, and you have to sell your property with a loss, then NHG will also cover this difference. A lot of benefits, and also the bank is happy with that because it reduces the risk for the bank. And in return, the bank is willing to give you a lower or a discount on your interest rate. a lot of benefits again, but in order to make use of the energy, you need to pay a one-time fee, which is 0.6% over the total mortgage amount. But you will easily earn it back because of this lower interest rate. And then another mortgage related topic is that the mortgage norms will change as well next year. There's a few things that will change. First of all, the energy label will be taken into consideration. So the better the label, the more you can borrow. I think for a B or A label, you can get around 10K more, and it starts already from a D. So that is interesting. For those of you who studied here in the Netherlands and have a study debt, it used to be the case that the bank looked at your initial debt. So if you had a debt of 30K and you paid off already 20K, they didn't look at the 10K left, but they looked at the initial 30K. That will change as of next year. And for people that are buying a loan, single people with an income of at least 28,000 euros can borrow 16K more next year. And all those things, right, as you can assume, will also have an impact on the prices, right? There's more money in the market. So yeah, again, I do expect prices to increase a little bit further in the coming months. Then this topic of savings. So we have a nice overview, and it's an overview of the closing fees, as we call them. And the closing fees you do need to pay from your savings. And the first one, and probably the most expensive one if you have to pay, is the transfer tax. As I mentioned, typically this is 2%. But not for people younger than 35 buying up to 440,000 euros. And you can only use it like one time. Well, let's say you are buying with a partner for 400,000 euros. You are 33, but your partner is 36. Well, in this case, only one of you has to pay the transfer tax. So basically you pay 2% over half of the purchase price. So in the end, you end up paying 1%. Then the notary, also an important player in the buying process. In order to become the official owner, you need to sign the transfer deed and also the mortgage deed. And in the third column, you see tax deductible. And good to know, everything in the buying process that is mortgage related is tax deductible. So yeah, the mortgage deed speaks for itself, is tax deductible. Then in order to get a mortgage, you need to reach out to your bank or to an independent mortgage advisor. What I always suggest is to work with an independent mortgage advisor instead of reaching out to your bank directly. And why is that? If you reach out to your bank directly, they can offer you a few different types of mortgages. But if you work with an independent mortgage advisor, they can offer you a mortgage from 30 different banks. And every bank has its own policy. So one bank is a bit more strict on self-employed people. One bank is a bit more strict on documents from the homeowners association. Like a lot of different things to take into account. But most importantly is that the rates differ per week. So it could be that this week ABN is the cheapest, but next week it's ING. So at the end, the mortgage advisor will be able to secure the best mortgage for you. If you guys want or are interested in a call with a mortgage advisor, feel free to put your email in the chat, and then I can refer you to someone that we have really good experiences with. Then EHN, you already see the fee. So we charge either 0.75 or 1% over the appraisal value. The appraiser, in order to apply for the mortgage, the bank wants to know the market value, which is officially defined by the appraiser. Also tax deductible. Technical inspector, which I would always advise, it's not mandatory, but if you're spending a few 100,000 euros on a property, yeah, I think you better spend the additional 465 euros as well. The interpreter, for those of you that do not speak Dutch, it is mandatory to have an interpreter present at the notary. So they will translate the deeds for you, so you know exactly what you sign for. Then the bank guarantee. So one of the articles in the purchase contract states that you need to provide a deposit equal to 10% of the purchase price in order to make sure you fulfill your obligations from the purchase contract. Well, of course, not everyone has a 10% deposit in terms of savings. So you can reach out to your bank and they can arrange the bank guarantee, which typically costs around 250 euros. And then last but not least, I already mentioned it, but if you want to make use of NHG, the costs are 0.6% of the total mortgage amount and also tax deductible. All right. Then renting versus buying. So I found two properties in Rotterdam, one on the Schieberg and one on the Sommanstraat. You might know them, or the streets. And the first one has a rent of 1,500 euros. The second one has an asking price of 400,000 euros. Well, first of all, you see the difference, right? The rental has is 62 square meters, whereas the other one is 92, so it's already bigger. But if we buy, let's say, the second one, we have to overbid a little bit. So we offer 405,000 euros. Then the interest rate, and I have to be honest, at the moment, I already mentioned it's a little bit higher, so it's I think around 4.3. But then your gross payments would be 1,969, but your net payments would also be 1,500 euros, let's say. And that is because your interest is tax deductible, right? So your monthly payments for the two properties would be the same. Well, then a short overview of the closing fees, assuming you're a starter and you're able to make use of the transfer tax exemption. So no transfer tax, notary 2,000 euros, mortgage advisor 2.5K, our fee for the complete package, the appraiser, technical inspector, the bank guarantee, and the cost of NHG. Then your total closing fees are 12,395. We say within 22 months, you've reached your break even. What do we mean by that? Within 22 months, you've built up a similar amount in terms of equity as your closing fees, right? So that is quite soon, if you ask me. But if you look at it from a 5-year perspective, it's even more clear. Because for the rent, you would have paid 90,000 euros, zero equity. Basically, you just pay off someone else's mortgage. If we own this property, if we bought it, then we would have paid 91,429. But out of that, 37K is equity, right? And then with this example, we did not include any increases in terms of value. At the moment, it's a little bit fluctuating. But if you look at the historical data from real estate, I think it is on average increasing by 5% per year as of World War II. Some years a little bit higher, some years you see a decrease, but that's the average. So if you're planning to stay for the long term, I would say buying is definitely a better option than renting. Then 3 tips to win the market. And the first one is value, value, value. And I think I can explain this best to you by showing you an example. So we have a property in Rotterdam with an asking price of 395,000 euros. So we viewed it, we like it. So before we submit an offer, what we do is we do a price research to have an understanding about the market value, because this is the amount the bank is willing to give you, right? But it was a very popular property. However, we really liked it. So in order to secure or to make the winning offer, we offered 435,000 euros. What people will say is that you overbid by 40K, right? More or less 10%. No, what we say, the actual overbid is 20K, right? You offer 20K more than the value. So good to keep in mind, overbidding is only if you offer more than the market value. Because the asking price is just an invitation for you to come and view the property, but it's not always, or most of the times, it's not a good representation of the value. Because if we take the same property, but a different selling agent, or they have a different strategy, now they put the property on the market for 375,000 euros. We did our research and we found out that the value is 415. Again, we overbid a little bit, or we overbid 20K, not a little bit, but 435. People will again say, you overbid by 16%. No, we did not. We overbid by 20K, 4.8%. Well, this is one example, but of course, it can also be the other way around. So we have a new property, asking price 450,000 euros. Well, let's say we did our research and we found out that the market value is 425, so it's lower. But if you did not do your research and you're like, I don't have the savings to overbid, I will just offer the asking price. Well, sorry, but in this case, you actually overbid by 25K, which is 5.5%, right? So in the ideal situation, asking price 450, do our research 425, and that is also what we offer. And then there's no overbid, no difference between the value and the purchase price. And I want to say it again, the difficulty about the current market is that there's no general rule like asking price is market value, or you have to overbid by 5%, or you have to offer 20K less. It really depends on the strategy of the selling agent. So good to keep that in mind. Talking about offers, what is a winning offer? A winning offer is a good price, but not always the highest price. Because if we take the last example where the value was 425 and you offer 450, if let's say you include a financial clause, so you need 100% financing, then the sellers might think, well, I'm not sure whether they will get 100%, so 450,000 euros, because the value is lower. So again, it's not always the highest price, but a good price. And what is important to the seller is security. So maybe you have some savings which you're able to use, and then you can maybe lower your financial clause, right? Lower the mortgage amount. Or if you're working with a mortgage advisor, you can ask for a statement which you can attach to the offer, saying, hey, my client is offering 425, but their capacity is way higher. I don't foresee any issues, right? That is really, really important to the seller. Then offer the least amount of hassle. What do we mean by that? There's a few things you can think of. Maybe the sellers, they move back to their home country and they want to get rid of the furniture. Yeah, it could be interesting for you to take it over. Or another example, maybe the sellers, they bought a new build property, and it happens a lot that the projects get delayed, right? Be a little bit flexible with the transfer date, right? Don't demand them to move 3 times in 6 months. I haven't met the first person that really likes moving, so be flexible with that. And then the last one is offer a personal touch. I don't say it's like the most important thing, but it can definitely help, right? Selling a property can be an emotional process. Probably memories have been made, maybe children have been born in the property. So a seller is always interested in the person that is going to live there. So it could be good to specify why you like the property and how you're going to take care of it. Before we move on to tip number 3, and that is to do your due diligence. And in order to do so, we have 2 parties, the technical inspector and the appraiser. We already saw them in the overview. And my question to you guys is, do you book them before or after your offer is accepted? All right, let me show you the answer. It is after your offer is accepted, because normally you have around 10 days between getting your offer accepted and signing the purchase contract. And within those 10 days, you can book the technical inspector and the appraiser. And it's really important to do that as soon as possible. Well, for the appraiser, as mentioned, the bank will only give you 100% of the market value. And especially if you don't have a price research, you want to know like what is the exact market value. So really important to have the report as soon as possible. And with the technical inspection, of course, before committing to a contract, you want to know whether there are any issues that you maybe missed during the viewing or from the documents. So let's say there is a leakage that we did or could not see, then this is the moment to renegotiate with the selling party, right? Maybe you can lower the purchase price, or you add a clause to the contract that the seller has to fix the leakage. Or if it's like really bad and you don't feel comfortable anymore, you just do not sign the contract. Good to know, even after you sign the contract, you have a cooling off period of 3 days in which you can dissolve the contract without paying a penalty. But if you want to pull out after those 3 days, you need to pay a penalty equal to 10% of the purchase price. So of course that's a lot of money. It would be a shame if you had to pull out for any of those reasons because you received the reports too late. So yeah, again, free tip, book them as soon as possible. All right. There was a lot of info. What I'm gonna do is just recap everything by going over the timeline and also explain how we can support you. The first thing you would have to do, or what I always say you would have to do, is to consult with a financial advisor, right? You do want to know how much you're able to borrow, but also how much are you willing to spend on the mortgage. Life is already quite expensive nowadays. Every time I go out to a bar or even the supermarket, I'm like, wow, is it that expensive? So you might not want to spend every single penny on your mortgage. Once that's clear, you can start looking for properties. Funda, it's the main platform. Basically, all the properties are listed on there. Well, let's say you found something interesting, then you can share the property with us, and we can help you with booking the viewing and attend the viewing with you. And during the viewing, it is really important to ask some critical questions to the selling agent, like what is the bidding procedure? So will there be a deadline or not? Do you already have some offers in? What are the expectations of the sellers? But of course, also to check the conditions of the property, right? In what state is it? However, the most important thing I always say is that you need to feel at home. With housing, it's always a feeling. What I see with most of my clients, often within a few minutes, they know whether it's a yes or a no. But if it's a yes, you come back to us because the feeling itself is not enough, right? So that is the moment where we start doing our homework. And the first thing we do is a price research. And with the price research, we're going to look for similar properties in the same building, street, or area. And based on that, we can see what the actual market value is. Then the other research we'll do is a property document review. And with the property document review, as mentioned in the beginning, we basically check any documents related to the property. Especially with apartments, you have a homeowners association. And what we check is if it's a healthy association. So what maintenance has been done, what maintenance is planned, do they have enough savings in order to cover those costs? Or is it expected that you need to pay additional fees to maintain the building? But also from a construction perspective, so are there any issues with moisture, with foundations, anything you can think of? And then also from a legal perspective, right? As explained, there's a lot of rules, regulation, restrictions, maybe things like ground lease, self-occupancy obligations. Well, we inform you about those as well. Then we'll schedule a call to review the researches, and based on that, we can submit the offer. We will also help you with the negotiations, and then hopefully we get the offer accepted. Well, once the offer is accepted, what's the first thing we do? To book the appraiser and the technical inspector. Then we receive the reports, we review them, and if all good, we can sign the purchase contract. Together with you, we will review it to make sure all the clauses are correct, you're protected. And if all good, of course, you can sign. Once you've signed the purchase contract, probably it's the last document you need in order to start your mortgage application. Depends a little bit on your personal situation, on your advisor. Normally, this will take about 4 weeks. And once your mortgage has been approved, yeah, you're almost there. Nothing can go wrong anymore, I would say. So then a week before the transfer, you will receive a statement of completion from the notary. And basically, this is an invoice with all the costs you have to pay. So the notary fees, your mortgage advisor, your agent, you will transfer all the money to the notary at once, and then the notary will make sure that everyone gets their part. And then it's the big day, transfer a date. So then you go to the notary to make it official, sign the deeds, you get the keys. But before we go to the notary, we go to the property once more to do a final inspection to see if the property is in the same condition as before. A lot can happen in the 4 weeks, sometimes even longer. I always give the example, maybe the sellers, they broke something with their goodbye party or with moving out. Yeah, that is something you did not sign up for when you signed the purchase contract. So then we inform the notary about this, and they will keep a certain amount in their account in order to fix it. But if everything's fine, you can sign the deeds and you are the proud owner of your new property in Rotterdam. And that's it. About the packages, so we have a few different packages, Smart, Complete, and the new build. With the Smart package, we're more like an online consult where people book and attend the viewings yourself or themselves. And then if you decide to submit an offer, we step in. So then we'll help you with the price research, property document review, offer submission, negotiations, reviewing the contract, arranging all the third parties, and some transfer support. Well, with the complete package, we are physically there for you. So then we'll book the viewings, we'll join you to the viewings, to the technical inspection, notary, and final inspection. And then for those of you that are interested in new builds, that process is a little bit different. But we can definitely support you with that as well. For the Smart package, as you can see, the price is 0.75% of the appraisal value. Complete package 1%, and for the new build, it's a fixed fee of 3,450. If you're interested in a call, feel free to book an intake with us. It's free, and then we can definitely look into your personal situation. Ludo, are there still questions left?
The majority of the questions have been answered already. So I'm just going to give everyone a couple of minutes to pop some unanswered questions in the Q&A section.
There's one question, and that's relating to the transfer tax. Good question, actually, because I forgot to mention this. In order to make use of the transfer tax exemption, now that is only possible up to 440,000 euros. Next year, this is up to 510,000 euros. So that's quite a big step. And yeah, hopefully you can make use of it as well.
Perfect. Oh, I see some other questions coming in. So, question from Aviv to you, Rick. Any special consideration when buying the house you are now renting?
Sorry, and any special?
Do you have any special recommendations, or are there special considerations the buyer should keep into account when they're trying to buy the house they are currently renting?
Oh, yeah, good question. I would make sure that you have all the documents, right? I don't know whether it's a house or an apartment, but yeah, let's say it's an apartment, then your landlord is responsible for the payments to the homeowners association. But if you are the owner, yeah, you are the one responsible. So please make sure you have a good understanding about that specific association. And of course, also to have a good understanding about the value, right? Not sure, but your landlord could make use of the fact that you're used to your home and therefore maybe set like a higher asking price because he thinks, oh, yeah, he lives there happily, so I will ask a little bit more. But yeah, make sure that you know about the value and consult with an expert, I would say.
Perfect. Cool. Thank you. Then a question from Dora. What happens if the mortgage application is not approved and the contract is already signed?
That's another good question. So that depends on your offer, basically, or on the purchase contract. What a lot of people do is they add a financial clause to the contract. And the financial clause basically states like, okay, I signed this contract. I need, let's say, 4 weeks in order to get my mortgage approved. If your mortgage is rejected within those 4 weeks, you can dissolve the contract without paying this 10% penalty, right? So that protects you against paying this penalty. If you did not include the clause, then unfortunately you do have to pay. But most people include a financial clause.
All right. Oh, I see there is a one more question coming in. How many years after the purchase of an apartment are you allowed to sell it?
At any time. So you can sell at any time. Yeah.
Yeah, so you even if you get ownership today, technically speaking, you can sell tomorrow already because the only thing that you really need for to be able to sell an apartment is to have an apartment. So that makes life easy. Of course, keep in mind that break-even point, as Rick mentioned, is only after a couple of months. So it might not be smart to sell immediately because you'll be throwing away some cash. But
And
technically speaking, it is
the price,
possible.
right? If you're a good negotiator, maybe you can make a profit, but
Yeah, exactly,
in
exactly.
general, it will take some time.
Then actually one more question from Sanket. Is it allowed to rent out if I'm also living there?
So you can rent out a room, but what you do need is permission from the bank. So yeah, please make sure you consult with your mortgage advisor or the bank. But yes, in general, you can rent out a room.
Yeah, so just good to have a agreement with your tenant as well.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, do banks generally allow this?
yeah. So with a residential, you mean like renting out a room?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that depends on the contract, right? So tenants in the Netherlands have quite some strong rights, and what the bank wants to avoid is that you cannot kick out, let's say, the tenant. So therefore, you need to make good agreements with your tenant.
Yeah, exactly. That will cover the risk for the bank. That's mostly what it's important for. Well, I see that there are more questions coming in. Perfect. Keep them coming. Question, Rick, in your experience, is the interest rate or does the interest rate differ if you want to rent it out or do Airbnb?
Yeah, so I don't think Airbnb is allowed if you have a residential mortgage. If you really have buy a property to rent it out, you need to have like an investor's mortgage, and this interest rate typically is a little bit higher than the residential one. Yeah.
Yeah, so also good to keep in mind is that if you have a residential mortgage because you are going to live in the property, but at any given time want to start using it as a investment property and rent it out, you'll need to change your mortgage type into a investment mortgage, which means the loan to value, so the amount of money you can get compared to the market value of the property is a little bit different, and the interest rate will be higher. Airbnb is something very different. It's seen as short-term rentals. Not a lot of homeowners associations agree with this and want to have this. And throughout the Netherlands, in general, even if the bank agrees to it and the homeowners association agrees to it, you cannot rent out your property for more than 30 days via Airbnb. That's just good to keep in mind. Okay. Then a question from Maria. Can you rent an apartment after a few years of living it if it's bought in the neighborhood without a self-occupancy obligation?
Yeah, if there's no self-occupancy obligation, then you can rent it out directly. If you have like this investor's mortgage, and what Ludo mentioned, good to know, your loan to value typically is around 70 to 80%. So that means you need to have quite some savings in order to arrange that.
Then a question from Raha. Do you think that if I buy a home sooner than later, that it's a better option in regards to potentially the pricing increasing in the near future?
Yeah, so I always say that the sooner the better indeed. And that is also because of the rents, right? If you remember the example, even though prices might decrease a little bit in, I don't know, because I don't know what will happen in 2 years. Let's say we have another war or crisis. Yeah, there's such a big difference in the loss you make with renting, that I would say the sooner the better. And again, if you look at it from a historical perspective, if you're not forced to sell, right, because then you can just keep the property, and you for sure you're better off than renting, and probably will make a profit as well.
Correct. A question from Ola. Is there a credit worthiness check in the Netherlands like the Schufa is in Germany? Like, does everyone have a credit score or anything like that?
It does not really like a credit score like in foreign countries and as in the States. But what you do need to do is inform the bank or your advisor about all the debts that you have. And yeah, my advice is just be honest. You don't want to be in a situation where you're happy with the property and all of a sudden you can't get the mortgage. So just be honest about all the debts and liabilities that you have to avoid those kind of situations.
But having like a credit score or anything like that, that is not something we have here. So I know that, for example, in the US, if 10 years in a row you've been late on your car payments, then your credit score is lower. If you are late on your payments every month here in the Netherlands, but the moment that you apply for a mortgage, you've paid off on your loans, then there's nothing, no problem whatsoever. So there's no credit score in that regards. What would you say, Rick? Is it generally better to buy new builds or existing builds, taking into consideration, for example, the maintenance cost?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of new builds, and that is because again, the projects get delayed all the time. And yeah, if you're looking for newer properties, and especially next year, I would just focus on relatively new properties, right? Especially since your mortgage capacity will increase. And that is what I would focus on instead of, because also if you buy a new build, you have double payments, because you start already paying for the mortgage first for the land, and then basically at every step of the project. So first you pay for the land, then you pay for the foundation, then you pay for the and so on. Like normally it's around 10 steps, I think. But you also have your rent, right? So yeah, that can be quite difficult, I would say. So yeah, my advice is look for a newer building instead of a new construction.
I agree. Then is it possible for someone to renegotiate with the seller based on a technical report? And does EHN assist in such cases?
Yeah. So what I mentioned, that is possible, right? So therefore, it's important to have the report before you sign a purchase contract, so you can still negotiate. I do have to say, if there's like you buy a house where people live, right? So there's always some things that you need to do. But if there's something like a major issue that no one was aware of, or the sellers were aware and they did not inform us, yes, that is definitely something we'll negotiate about.
Yeah, for sure. some listings also mention that the property is on lease up to a certain year, for example, for the ground lease. What does it mean? And usually, what is the amount that one needs to pay to the municipality in the future?
Good question. Yeah, so maybe good to understand the concept of ground lease. So some properties or most properties in Rotterdam, if you buy them, you own the land. But in some cases, the land is owned by the municipality. And if that's the case, you have to pay a leasehold. And then on Funda, you'll see probably like located on ground lease, paid off until 2053. That means that the land is owned by the municipality, and then in 2053, the municipality at that moment will look again at the value of the land, and based on that, they will come up with a new price or leasehold. Most of the times you pay this for 25 years for a fixed period, but we can't tell you what the price you pay will be in the future, because they look at the value at that specific moment. Good to keep in mind, the bank sees this also as like a liability that you have. So therefore, probably they will lower your mortgage capacity.
Indeed, yeah. A question from Raha: which neighborhood best to buy a home?
Which neighborhoods?
Yeah, of course, it's a little. I guess it's a little bit personal what you want, city center or not. But are there some that you recommend?
Yeah, so indeed it depends on the person, right? So if you're a family, you want a bit more, yeah, quiet peace, then I think it's different than if you're looking for bars or at least people around you. Personally, I really like Kralingen, of course, because it's yeah, there's so much facilities around close to Kralingse Bos. But what is really developing at the moment is the southern part, right? Maybe for those of you who don't know, they're planning to create a city beach on the southern part of Rotterdam, which, yeah, from the plans they have, it looks amazing. And in that specific area, you also have a lot of new constructions. And I think in the future, it is also the idea to bring the city center more towards the south side as well, so that you really have two sides on the water. So I think that will be for sure a really interesting area in the future. But again, yeah, I think it depends a little bit on your personal situation.
Maybe an interesting question. Do you potentially see the effect of climate change in the property pricing?
Yeah, I think that is what you'll see now with being able to borrow more for properties with a higher label, right? So the plan, of course, is to make all the properties more sustainable. So yeah, it does impact the properties yeah, in for sure.
Well, there's, for example, a question about an hypothetical future coastline that the water is going to rise. Do you expect Rotterdam to be underwater then?
No, so I trust in the government. They've been doing an amazing job, at least for the last year. So I don't expect like it will flood, but yeah, you do see some impacts, right? Especially with the drought, for example, in the summers. How do you say that? Like the old properties that are built on wooden beams, they are affected by the drought because the beams will be affected. So there are indeed some things to keep in mind because of the climate changes.
Yeah, and it's funny that that it's asked, because there was actually an article today on the news stating that even if the water level rises with more than 3 meters, that the current dikes can be increased with that amount, so that the entire Netherlands will stay dry and yeah, keep dry feet. So that's good news. All right, that's it. Thanks everyone for putting your questions in the Q&A. Rick, thanks very much for answering all the questions and giving a very clear webinar. I think it was very valuable.
then yeah, I want to wish everyone a nice evening. Stay inside and warm, and yeah, maybe we'll talk at a later stage.
That would be great. All right.
All right.
Good evening, guys. See you.
Bye bye.